Hey audio nerds, and welcome back to the channel, and it's episode 2 of our series looking at home audio streaming solutions. In episode 1 we looked at a dedicated streamer, the ZenStream from iFi. Remember, that device was a pure streamer and it needed to be paired with a DAC and an amp. Today we're going in the other direction to look at a product which is capable of streaming audio as well as acting as a DAC and integrated amp. I am talking, of course, about the Cyrus One Cast. Now, I'm a bit excited about this one because I've long been a fan of the British Cyrus brand, dating back to when I first upgraded from my beginner hi-fi system to a Cyrus DAC around 17 years or so ago, and my Cyrus 8 integrated amp and Cyrus DAC X are still going strong as part of my main living room listening rig. So we come to the Cyrus One series, and there are 3 products in the series so far. First came the Cyrus One amplifier, which features the core Class D amp, which puts out 100 watts into 8 ohms, and it also features line level inputs, 4 of them I think, along with aptX Bluetooth support. The next model up is the Cyrus One HD, which adds 3 digital inputs and features an internal ESS DAC. And the top of the range model is the Cyrus One Cast, which features all that good stuff, along with the ability to act as a streaming audio receiver. Now, it was first launched at £1,300, £1,299 in fact, but I can't help noticing that it can be had nowadays for just under £1,000 from very many outlets such as Amazon, and it's currently just £150 more than the One HD at £849. So, is the One Cast, a one box £1,000 unit, worthy of one's attention? Sorry. I would say that it's a definitely maybe. No, not that one. Let's take a closer look. First thing to say is that I love the design in principle. It breaks a little from Cyrus's recent design language, and it's a callback to the original Cyrus One amplifier from way back in the early 80s, I think. Like that vintage favourite, it features large knobs, 2 of them, on the glossy black front panel. There is a volume control along with an input selection knob. However, the knobs themselves feel lightweight and very plasticky, unlike the solid knobs on my old Cyrus 8 amp, and I don't like the extremely tacky looking front panel. Overall, the front of the unit feels a bit cheap and flimsy, and I personally am disappointed with it at the £1,000 price point. You can see that there is a 6.3mm headphone jack up front, and the Cyrus One also contains a discrete Class AB headphone amp. The other problem I have with the front panel is the brightness of those indicator LEDs. The default setting results in retina searing levels of brightness, and even if you turn it down, the lowest setting is still bright enough to kill the vibe if you're trying to listen to something like Brutal's Untrue album at midnight, which of course is the best time to listen to that album. What you don't get is any type of LCD display informing you of sample rates or anything like that. The little markings on the source selection button are so small that you definitely won't see them when you're sitting back in your comfy armchair, making it a matter of guesswork to get the right input using a rather tacky remote control. Yes, there is a somewhat shonky remote control that comes bundled with the One Cast. It's small and cheap feeling, and it has a slightly bizarre layout of buttons, including the brightness control featured very prominently where you might expect the volume control to be. It's almost as if the Cyrus guys know that those darned LEDs are too bright and you'll be fumbling to turn them down before they sear their image into your eyeballs forever. The narrow housing of the body of the amp is made of matte aluminium, and that bit actually looks and feels great, much like Cyrus products of old. Let's take a look at the rear of the unit to see what all those inputs are. First of all, you get a number of digital inputs, and you get a choice of either USB or optical and even coaxial SP-diff inputs. All of these inputs, of course, will feed the signal through the unit's inbuilt ESS DAC. Interestingly, there's also an ARC HDMI input allowing you to connect to your TV or projector if you so wish. You've also got, rather nicely, a phono stage, which is a rarity these days, and it'll work for turntables with moving magnet cartridges. There's also an additional analog line level input to connect anything else that you might want to. Remember, the One Cast will also accept Bluetooth aptX streams, and then we come to the streaming support. Essentially, the OneCast will act as both a Chromecast and AirPlay receiver, allowing wide compatibility with most audio software. Unfortunately, the OneCast is not a Roon-ready device, so it can't receive music from Roon via the RAAT streaming protocol. However, it will show up in Roon as either an AirPlay or Chromecast device, and remember that both of these protocols will allow lossless playback of CD quality audio, which is all I'm interested in. In terms of outputs, there is a pre-out connection if you want to hook it up to a power amp, but the 100 watt into 8 ohms should be enough for most speakers. Cyrus claims that it has built a speaker impedance detection circuit into the OneCast and also the cheaper One HD, allowing the power output to be matched carefully with whichever speaker you are using. I used it, of course, with my beloved KEF LS50 Metas, and it drove even those somewhat power-hungry beasts with ease. Now, you don't have to use the Cyrus One Cast as a streamer. It works fine in offline mode, just as an integrated DAC and amp, but if that's what you want, you'd be much better off saving your money and going for the Cyrus One HD for £150 less. Now, if you do want to use it as a streamer, thankfully connecting it to your network is easy, although you have to use the Google Home app, which will quickly recognize it and add it to your home network. There is no dedicated app here, and you'll have to use Chromecast or AirPlay to get it playing nicely with any streaming music. And thankfully, using one of those two protocols has you pretty much covered whichever music service you're using. So for example, I had it happily streaming the likes of Qobuz, Tidal and Spotify from my phones and laptops. As I mentioned, I had it on my Roon network as a Chromecast enabled endpoint, which allowed me to control it, but it just didn't have that full functionality of a Roon ready device. I also tested it via the digital USB input directly from my iPad, and I even fed my project turntable with the Autophon Red cartridge into the phono stage. The one thing I didn't do was use it as a Bluetooth receiver because, quite frankly, with all those other options, why would you use Bluetooth? So, how did it fare? Well, it did drive the LS50 Metas very well, as I already mentioned. These speakers can be a bit subdued unless they're fed with enough raw power, but that was never an issue with the OneCast. I didn't have to crank the volume knob that far in order to get these singing beautifully. Using the Cyrus One Cast's internal ESS DAC gave extremely pleasing results. The presentation was pretty neutral and nicely balanced with a decent amount of detail. There is no part of the frequency response that's particularly overemphasized, but the bass is definitely not lacking and has real body and texture. Given the slightly neutral presentation, it sounds a little bit laid back and is a very comfortable, non-fatiguing listen rather than an aggressive, in-your-face kind of amp. Some might call it perhaps a little bit sterile, but I like the subtle way that it handles even complex pieces of music, giving a nice detailed insight into large orchestral classical pieces, for example. Interestingly, other reviewers, What Hi-Fi for one, have commented on the fact that the OneCast seems to lack a sense of timing, but I must admit that I couldn't really criticise it for that, with even rhythmically complex tracks like some dubstep, for example, coming across with precision. I found the wireless network performance to be a little bit flaky, unfortunately. There were very many stutters and dropouts when casting to the device, regardless of whether I was using AirPlay or Chromecast protocols. Now compare that to the rock-steady performance I get with my Raspberry Pi streamer or the iFi Zen Stream that I tested in my last video, and I find that odd and disappointing, particularly at the £1,000 price point. Overall, the OneCast lacks the streaming compatibility and functionality of much cheaper dedicated streamers such as the iFi Zen Stream or the Bluesound Node 2021. If you remember, the iFi Zen Stream, for example, offered native support for Roon streaming, as well as AirPlay, Chromecast, DLNA support, and although it lacked an inbuilt DAC and amp, given that it only cost £399, you could easily pair it with something like the Audiolab A6000, which sounds great for £599, and that combination would compete very favourably with the OneCast, both in terms of streaming versatility and sound quality. In fact, I'll confess that the main way I used OneCast was actually with my Raspberry Pi streamer hooked up to the OneCast via USB. That way I got the room-ready streaming experience that I love from the Raspberry Pi, combined with the really nice sound of the DAC and amp of the Cyrus. Because yes, I really like the sound and it pairs nicely with the LS50s. However, I don't think the sound is significantly better than my much older, lower powered Cyrus 8 amp, and I would question whether it's really worth £1,000, leave alone the original ridiculous asking price of £1,300. With the OneCast, Cyrus have attempted to craft an elegant one-box solution here, a bit like the name Unity Atom for example, but unfortunately I don't think they've pulled it off. By limiting the streaming options, I can't see any reason to get this over the cheaper 1HD. In fact, I think the 1HD is probably the pick of the range here, but I would have to test it properly to see if it's truly better than something like a £600 amp, such as the Audio Lab. So, who will this appeal to? Maybe lovers of a nice, open, neutral sound who are no more than casual streamers and who do want a neat one-box solution for £1,000. Sadly, that's not me, and I can't give it a recommendation despite its very, very nice sound quality. So, are all-in-one products at the £1,000 price point too ambitious? Join me in the next video when I'll look at another potential competitor, the 2021 version of the Bluesound Power Node, which is a little bit cheaper in fact at £849. So that video is coming up soon, but in the meantime I hope you enjoyed this video. As I say, I'm a huge Cyrus fanboy, so I'm really disappointed with the OneCast. But props to Cyrus for sending me the kit to review, and as ever, no money has changed hands. These are, as you can tell, my unbiased thoughts. Take care guys, I'll see you in the next video.